Once upon a time there was a happy ship called the Arandora Star. She would take people to sunny climes far from the British winter. But in 1940 her colourful livery and all the happy memories disappeared forever as Europe was plunged into the darkness of war and the Arandora Star was painted the drab grey of a troop ship. Join us on the north coast of Ireland and hear the story of her last voyage. Wonderful, isn't it? Welcome to the North Coast. I have loved this place from the moment I saw it over 50 years ago, and I know many of its stories, tales of 500-year-old castles like this one at Dunluce, tales of the giant Finn McCool and his causeway, tales of Spanish galleons wrecked on these fearsome cliffs. There are happy stories and sad stories, but none more tragic than this one. From high on the cliffs, look west to Malin Head on the horizon. Somewhere beyond the line of clouds, deep beneath the Atlantic, lies the wreck of the Arandora Star. Benvenuti ai nostri amici in Italia. Welcome to our friends in Italy. Sono Michael McRitchie.
E sono Brenda McRitchie.
We live near Belfast, about 65 miles from this, our favourite place. Behind us, to the west, is Malin Head, and to the east, in front of us, is Rathlin Island. That's it, on the horizon. Rathlin is the burial place of Giuseppe Capella, one of the hundreds of Italians who died when the Arandora Star was torpedoed on July the 2nd, 1940. 3 years ago we went to Rathlin to photograph his grave for his family. This was the start of a journey which would take us all round the northwestern coasts of Ireland and finally to Bardi in northwestern Italy, the area where so many of the victims came from. Our story of the Arandora Star is told in the words of the newspapers of the time and of the people who were there when it happened. And as we learnt more and more about the terrible events on that day in 1940, we decided to make this video for the families of Bardi. This is our tribute to them and to all who were lost off our coasts.
Why did it happen? By the middle of 1940, Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. The German army was massing in the Channel ports and their invasion was expected any day. At sea, the U-boats were strangling the lifeline to America. In the skies, the Battle of Britain was nearing its climax. On June the 10th, Italy declared war on Britain. In this desperate situation, all enemy aliens were arrested. With starvation a real possibility, the government ordered that these internees be shipped to Canada. On July the 1st, the Arandora Star left Liverpool, carrying 1,200 German and Italian prisoners, guarded by 200 soldiers.
She sailed past the Isle of Man, where many Italians were interned, through the North Channel between Scotland and Ireland, then west past Malin towards Canada. At about 8:30 next morning, when she was about 70 miles west of Ireland, she was torpedoed by the submarine U-47. The Arandora Star sank in half an hour. There was not enough lifeboats to begin with, and 2 were destroyed in the explosion. That afternoon, many were rescued by a Canadian destroyer which had answered the ship's distress call, but more than 800 of the 1,600 men aboard lost their lives. Some went down with the ship, some drowned, and some were smothered in the tons of thick fuel oil which covered the surface of the sea. For weeks, the bodies of Italians, Germans, the British seamen and the army guards were washed ashore along 600 miles of coastline, from the Western Isles of Scotland to County Mayo in Ireland. Of the 446 Italians who perished that day, less than 20 were identified. Some of these are buried in the Scottish Islands. There's 2 near Malin Head and 1 in County Mayo. We have found 27 unidentified victims buried along these northwestern Irish coasts. Our journey today will take us to Malin Head, the most northerly point in Ireland, then southwest to County Mayo, and finally back to our starting point on Rathlin Island. In early August, a northwesterly gale brought a grim harvest to the Irish coast. In the next few weeks, dozens of victims were laid to rest along 300 kilometres of coastline. They lie in cemeteries at Rathlin, Bonamargee, Tory Island, Carndona, Culdaff, Clonmany, Fawn, Cruet Island, Mahragallen, Kilclooney, Narin, Ardara, Kilcar, Killybegs, Killachty, Frossus, Bundoran, Ehamplish, Carrigan, Dromore West, Easky, Ballycastle, County Mayo, Kilgalligan, Termancara, Kilcomaneris, and Falmore. The Arandora star had bequeathed Ireland a sad legacy. On the long drive to Malin Head, we wondered about the lives of the Italians who had come so far to die lonely deaths in the Atlantic. Most of them were older men. Giuseppe Capello was 55 and had been a waiter in the Savoy Hotel in London. They were simple, hard-working people who had come from poor regions of Italy to work in cafes, restaurants, and of course the ice cream business. Many had worked in Britain for years, but in those desperate days all were picked up and interned. This is my native city of Belfast, which has had an Italian community for hundreds of years. Many were arrested after Italy declared war and interned on the Isle of Man. But this is the sad story of the 2 who went on the Arandora star. In those early days, fascism was seen as the symbol of a resurgent Italy and a force for good, certainly not as it's seen today. In Belfast, the fascisti paraded to the cenotaph on Armistice Day because Italy had fought with the Allies in World War I. Our Italian community, pictured here shortly before the war, was as highly regarded as it is today. Giuseppe Forti owned the Continental Cafe in Castle Street. He was the leader of the Belfast Fascisti, and the deputy leader was his nephew Antonio Fusco. Giuseppe Forti was arrested as soon as Italy declared war, but the Antonio Fusco who was also arrested wasn't his nephew, but another Tony Fusco, who wasn't even a fascist. Tony's family had lived in Britain for almost 30 years, and he worked in the family chip shop in York Street, as did his younger brother Alfredo. Now aged 89 and still living in Belfast, Freddie Fusco recalls what happened.